Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined by Ed Pie. Ed, it has been a turbulent couple of weeks in Major League Rugby news. We're going to start off there. Um, Basically within the space of, I think, 8 days, we've gone from a 11-team league down to 8. It's very confusing. We'll begin with the news that has come out from the West Coast, which was it's losing two teams but gaining one. So San Diego Legion and RFC Los Angeles have announced that they are to merge and therefore play as the California Legion. And they mentioned that they'll be playing at least two games in Los Angeles, three games in San Diego, and then other games around California. Um, Before we get into it, it seems like even with the naming choice, that this seems to be a San Diego-led enterprise. I think the branding is, consistent with what we've seen. It's instead of the SD shield has now become the CL or CA shield, and the iconography that was RFC Los Angeles seemed to have gone away. Now, we haven't seen kits or anything in terms of like sponsorship. There's just been this news that's come out. We know that the CEO of this new team previously was with Los Angeles, but and they've said in like press releases, this is about consolidating, um, resources in order to push rugby within California. When that all sounds interesting, the timing is obviously very questionable, and yeah, it's leaving. I would say it leaves a bitter taste, but technically, while both these teams have ended, their legacy still continues. So it's a funny taste in the mouth, I think is probably the better choice to use. But Ed, what do you make of this new team and this merger?
Well, I think Stu is definitely leaving a bit of taste in the mouth of some of the fans. I've been following some of the chat boards there in the forums, and people are not happy that it's being amalgamated to such a wide area. I think a lot of people buy season tickets, hoping to go to a lot of games, and then to have games spread across a full state like California, that's an enormous territory. So. I think getting a lot of those fans to those games is going to be tricky. Um, I mean, from a branding perspective, San Diego's been there for a while. They actually had quite a really strong branding presence. As someone who's a rugby graphic designer, I absolutely hated the LA logo. I thought it was awful. But the Legion had a really strong print. The colors were strong. The branding was really strong. So maybe they're just running with that from a branding perspective. And the Legion's a strong name as well. So yeah, it's a real shame for the fans, but hopefully they can an amalgamation, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Hopefully, they can come away with a stronger team, a stronger brand. It really depends who they've got in the back room, who they've
Mhm.
got organizing, controlling everything. You could look at a few different areas as positives, but it all depends how they capitalize on having that such a large area to work across and how they engage the fans again after amalgamating a team.
Yeah, I think one of the arguments I saw in like for this rebrand is saying that, well, you have the Utah Warriors. They're not the Salt Lake Warriors, they are the Utah Warriors. They're focusing on state recognition and branding in that sense. And on paper, yes, that is a solid argument. But I think the issue for myself and for, fans of both San Diego and Los Angeles is that neither of these teams started as a state team. They started as a city team, and now they're becoming a state team. This is where, if San Diego Legion had started as California Legion, that would have been a different question of, okay, this is the only team in California. We can work with that and go from there. Obviously, we've had the Giltinis and RFCLA since then, so we know that there has been competition within California, and there's not just a one team state. And I think that is the issue that a lot of fans are having, especially close fans, is that California, one of a bigger population than Canada, and now it only has this one team to represent it. And I know that some of the wording they've used in the press releases has a heavy focus on Southern California. And, but that then brings the other question is that, well, if this is only in Southern California, is it really a California team if it's ignoring half of the state? And, hopefully all these questions will be answered at some point in the future. And, as strange or as weird as having a amalgamation of these two teams, it at least means that their legacy in some way continues, which is not what we can say about these other two teams. So a day after this merger was announced, NOLA Gold had put on their website and then followed it up on social media saying that they would withdraw from the 2026 season of Major League Rugby. And then today we have had the news that the Miami Sharks are withdrawing from MLR as well. And even after their executive won Executive of the Year yesterday. So, it's bringing the entire league down to 8 teams. And, I feel bad for all these fans. Miami as well. They've been around for a couple of years. They made the playoffs for the first time this year as well. And it just seems like the financial backing they had behind them had decided that enough was enough. They didn't want to put up with another season of this, and they've withdrawn. But my heart especially goes out to the fans of NOLA Gold. NOLA, one of the founding teams of MLR, and now they have decided to leave. And I'm wearing my Toronto Arrows cap. You're wearing your Toronto Arrows cap, Ed. We know how a sudden departure can like really affects like fan morale and stuff like that. Um, you know, at least this was done before the MLR draft. At least this was done soon after the end of the season, compared with the Arrows who just had um basically had their team pulled after all this in November of 2023. Different circumstances, obviously. Um, but yeah, and the general consensus has been trepidation amongst fans, like fear is like this league was growing for a number of years. And yeah, we all expected certain teams to fold or withdraw after, a number of years. That's the state of any sports league within North America. But to go from even the 2024 season of having, I think it was 12 teams, and then we lost the Dallas Jackals, and now we're down to 8 teams. We're basically in a we're in a position closer to when the league started than any other time in its history. And and the questions are coming up. Is that, and I don't want to say like, is this league viable from a financial perspective? Because I think that's a loaded question because MLS was unviable for the first half of its existence. Even in 2012, of the 19 teams that competed in MLS, only 10 turned a profit. So I think we have to just keep those things in mind of like the financial viability is always going to be up in the air. It's always going to be a question. It's never going to be fully secured. It's not like the NFL or NHL or anything along those lines at this point. And everyone has to start somewhere. But yeah, it's really throwing a wrench in it. But Ed, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think from a fan perspective, some of the other teams that have dropped out so far, there's you can understand what's happened there. So, like Toronto, with the death of Bill Webb, he was obviously a key member of keeping that team together and organizing the team. So you can see how the team kind of collapsed a little bit with his death. Um, the teams like your Giltinis and your Gilgronis. Um, those teams, you could see what happened there because they had an owner that came in, thought he was bigger than the league, spent a bunch of money, and then wasn't playing well with the league. So you could see the reasons for why that team collapsed. Even a startup team like Miami, where they've come in, they've bought a lot of really expensive players from South America.
Hmm.
You could kind of you know, uh, figure out a reason as to why they've pulled out. But I think the real one is NOLA. Like NOLA dropping out without much explanation just yet.
Hmm.
That is the one that I think, as you're right, have got people a little bit worried about what's happening with the league. In my dealings with the league over the years, NOLA was always the one team that was very much we've got everything covered ourselves. We don't need any help from the league. We will do all the merchandising ourselves.
Hmm.
We have all of the resources. We have everything in place that we need to have our team run successfully. And based on their results over the years, you'd have to say that bore out. So them pulling out now is interesting. It really sort of throws the cat amongst the pigeons
Hmm.
as to what's going on with the league, what the future of the league could be. 8 teams is manageable. It's a good amount for a league of this size, but it does make you wonder what's happening behind the scenes that
Hmm.
is actually causing these teams to actually pull out. So Noel is a bit of a scary one. It's the conversation around okay, we've got a World Cup coming up in the US,
Hmm.
not too far away. It's getting closer and closer. What happens if there's not a pro league operating around that time? What's that going to do to a World Cup? I wonder if World Rugby right now is looking at these teams pulling out, saying, "Okay, we're going to have to step in here and actually put some more resources into Major League Rugby."
Yeah, so apparently, per Miami's owners, they say that the reason for their withdrawal is the league is directly responsible, saying MLR's control over operations, the capital raising constraints, and the control over player rights makes the feasibility of the league impossible from an owner slash operator perspective. Now, again, that is the um, owner of Miami. So of course they don't want to take any responsibility for folding as well. So take it all with a pinch of salt. I think that, there are some credibility to that, as you explained. I remember when I was looking into getting Arrows merch from like shopmlr.com, there would be all these teams except NOLA because NOLA was so focused on their own and is like if you want to get anything from NOLA, you have to go through NOLA's official shop, which also kind of set it apart, and you can say that's a positive or a negative because if you were a new fan of MLR and you wanted to follow the gold and you weren't based in New Orleans, then you'd have to do a bit of digging just to find out if you could be able to get all the merch that you wanted to. Um, I do feel there is liability on the league for this. Like you have to say, look, if two of your teams have to merge in order to continue playing in the league and one of your founding teams has decided to fold, we really need to look at what is and isn't working for MLR, like what changes can be made that, you know, again, 8 teams, as we said, is perfectly reasonable to continue going. In 2019, we had a 9-team league, which was a double round robin, and that worked very well. Um, but yeah, you really have to think about this as well. There's also a rumor going around that with this new R360 rugby union competition going out, is that one of the locations where this touring rugby will take place is in Miami. Now, does
Mm.
that mean that the Miami Sharks just become the Sharks and become one of the hosts of this league? Again, it's just a rumor. No weight or credibility to any of this. But I'm just saying, you heard it here first. If Louis Rees-Zammit signs for the Sharks and is playing in Miami in R360 in 2026.
The one thing there, Stu, I'll say though is, I mean, we are living in tough financial times at the moment. It's
Mm,
very difficult for, teams that don't have huge fan bases to actually create profit and become viable enterprises. So you are going to see teams folding over time. But that just makes me question the R360 league. Where are they getting their money from to actually be able to create such a wide spanning competition with all of these stars that kind of has this IPL
mm,
feel to it where the players are going to be getting paid millions of dollars. I don't know that that's viable in rugby at the moment. So
mm.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've heard the rumor mill saying that it's financially backed by um, equity from the United Kingdom, the United States, and Saudi Arabia, who have already thrown their hat into the ring of hosting the one of the Rugby World Cups in the either late 2030s or early 2040s. We'll see if that all comes to be. But I still remember people talking about the NRFL. Being that would be the big thing of rugby in North America. I've been waiting since 2012, guys. Any day now. Now's the perfect time to swoop in and claim those licenses from MLR and get going. I sure expect Owen Farrell to get his $1 million salary that you talked about in 2013. Any day now, any day now. But that's all in the future. Let's look back to Ottawa last Friday because in the build-up to the Women's Rugby World Cup, Canada played their only home game of the year, and it was against the old enemy of the United States. In Ottawa, it was an absolute classic. It didn't start the way we all hoped it would, but it ended the way we all wanted to see. The United States actually getting the first points on the board with a try, I think within the second minute. And then after that, the game somewhat settled in. Canada able to go over, scoring a penalty try. The USA down to 14 players. Penalty kick to the USA brought them back up to 10-7. And then just before halftime, we had McKinley Hunt going over for a try, getting converted by Sophie de Goody. So halftime, 14-10. And then in the second half, we had Gabrielle Senft going over, followed by Olivia de Merchant in the 63rd minute, Flo Simons in the 65th minute, in quite possibly one of the plays of the game. And then finally, Michaela Nelson, 5 minutes before the end. Sophie de Goody converting all with the exception of Nelson, which was converted by Julia Schell, obviously the penalty try, 7-pointer immediately. The USA unable to respond. The final score Canada 42, United States 10. And this was done in a record crowd of 11,453, which is the largest crowd ever for a standalone women's rugby match in North America. Hey, what can we say about Canadian women that hasn't been said 1,000 times already? But bringing over 11,000 fans to TD Place, yeah, definitely can't deny that this is a team that is one of the contenders to lift the Women's Rugby World Cup later this year. Ed, what do you make of the match?
Yeah, I think the crowd is an indication that the Canadian public is getting on board with the team. My wife just came in earlier and said that the Tragically Hip are doing a fundraiser for the women's team now, so you can get Tragically Hip slash Rugby Canada women's merch. Um,
Hmm.
online. So I think people should jump on there and get that's going to sell out really quickly. So it's great to see that the Canadian public, the Canadian people are getting in behind the team. In terms of the performance, I think the key takeaway that Canada will take from the game is that they got better as the game wore on. They were awful in the first 20 minutes of that game.
Mm.
Right off the kickoff, when the US basically rumbled right from halfway, finding space in and around the rucks, every carry that they were having was making meters. Canada's defense, I thought, was quite passive. But
Mm.
what I think we saw from them in terms of a defensive strategy was that they were not looking for dominant tackles. They were looking to tackle on the ball and then get in for a jackal. So you saw multiple players going into tackles to actually try and jackal, but the US were able to sort of um, get around that strategy to start with. And that first play, you saw how well they were going. The US scrum in the first 20 minutes was dominant over the Canadian scrum. So those first 20 minutes there, I was like, whoa, this is not the performance level that you would expect from Canada. But the big takeaway there and the big sort of thing that gives you confidence for the World Cup, for the Canadian team in general, is that Canada did not give up at all. They just grew stronger throughout the game. So when you got into the second 20 minutes of the first half, the Canadian scrum started getting more dominant. They started their defensive strategy started working in that they started getting a lot of turnovers. Um, Flo Simons got a couple there. So, not just with their forwards, but also out in their back line as well. Their line out and rolling maul started to become effective. And you saw a couple of tries in there from rolling mauls. So those set piece parts that they kind of were, maybe taking a bit of energy out of USA at the beginning of the game, they started to come back into that, get their own momentum from those different areas, and then that just led to them being dominant for the rest of the match. It was interesting seeing De Goody playing at lock. I wonder if those first 20 minutes, her unfamiliarity with the role at lock, as well as having Buka Boom there, who's obviously more of a sub most of the time, although Buka Boom was really good in open play, but having those two in the second row, maybe that depowered the scrum a little bit, and it took them a little bit
Mm.
of time to actually get used to, the 8 man or 8 woman push, I should say.
Mm.
So they definitely got better. They definitely came into the game more. The defensive strategies that they were utilizing definitely became far stronger throughout the game. The US, I'm kind of I don't know what happened to them. They in that first play, you could see the exact blueprint that would go through Canada. But then throughout the rest of the game, they seemed to have just Alona Ma playing at standoff. She was playing first receiver in just about every ruck, and she doesn't really have much of a ball playing game. She was just going into that position and running it up like she was a 6 or an 8. It was really a weird strategy for them when they were given the blueprint right at the beginning of the game on how to break through Canada, and then they just went into this. They were passing wide, or they were just getting Ma to hit it up off first phase. So that was a really weird sort of pivot from US there, and Canada just took full advantage of it. Um, I think the other thing that we should say about Canada is that when their subs came on, the subs were really strong.
Mm.
Nelson was great, Buisa was great. Everybody who came on added strength to the team, and they finished really, really strongly. So that's something I think that Canada's going to look at as a strength. We talk about the bomb squad in South Africa, being able to bring on like for like replacements and maintain quality. Canada,
Mhm.
I think, is building that. Their loose forwards and lock options there are really strong. We saw Dalika Menon, what was it, 60 caps, I think she's got now. So she
Mhm.
was really strong. Front row was great across the board. And then, yeah, you've got backs like Simmons, Tessia, who, again, that's another thing I think is great, is that Gallagher sort of underplayed her hand in the game. She was more of a passing option. But when you've got Gallagher and Tessia playing 10 and 12, that gives you two ball playing options that allows players like Simons to come into the game more. So I think that's a strong selection option for Canada as well. So pretty pleased with the game overall. I think it was a good victory for Canada.
Yeah, I think one thing to also focus on is the indiscipline of both teams. Um, as you mentioned, the first 20 was the poorest for Canada throughout the game, including when Sophie de Goody got a yellow card for a crocodile roll. Um, you know, good eyes from the referee to pin that down. Um, Haley Taufu was yellow carded as part of the penalty try. And then in the start of the second half, Cheta Ember from the United States was also yellow carded as well, and that directly helped Canada score their try of the second half. And yeah, it was really strange for the USA to just see they had this perfect attacking plan to go after Canada, who, as you mentioned, had Sophie de Goody as lock, which is not where she normally plays. And then after that 20 minutes, it just all seems to fall away. You know, the USA are in a very difficult group. I mean, they're in the same pool as England, so not expecting miracles from them, especially in that first game. But I expected more from the US. I mean, this was a team that at least got 14 points on Canada the last time they played in the Pacific Four series. But then again, I think home crowd advantage just truly galvanized this Canadian team into getting over the line. I also noticed that Karen Pakwi, um, for her tackle off the ball, prevented try being scored for Canada, which was disappointing. But then she had that breakaway, which also helped set up Simmons' try. So potato, potato. And yeah, and it was, I think, as well, having this game in Ottawa on Canadian soil, knowing that this is going to be your only opportunity to play in front of a home crowd this year, really had Canada playing their absolute best by the time it got to, 60 minutes to the 80 minutes. And yeah, I agree. On the back foot at the start, but they never gave up. I actually heard on the broadcast them talking about like how Canada's pack spread out across the field. England will be looking at this game. They'll be taking notes of where to go from because, we may be a bit biased, but we have said this seems to be the strongest and deepest forward pack in women's international rugby. And, if you're going up against the world number ones, the hosts of the World Cup, you want to be able to back that up. Absolutely. Now, for the USA, they are going to have to wait until August the 22nd when they will be facing the England in the opening game at the Stadium of Light in Sutherland. But for us Canadians, we have one more game before the Women's Rugby World Cup, and that will be against Ireland in Dublin this Saturday. So sorry, not Dublin, in Belfast. Yeah, that's the problem when Ireland plays as a unified team and they have two capitals to play in. So apologies to my Republic of Ireland friends. This game will be held at the Kingspan Stadium in Belfast, August the 9th, and that is at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. So it's going to be an early riser for you, Ed, to watch that game, unfortunately. But if you want to watch that game, you can do so on TSN. Follow our social media accounts to find out which channel it will be. We will announce it once it has been announced by TSN. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more as well as our written pieces on our website, rougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast on Spotify, and we're on YouTube at The Rouge Rugby. Make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Ed, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, on Facebook or YouTube at rugby101_2025.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Ed, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.